Welcome in. Brett Harris here at the Barstool Sports Book, and I'm with writer Thom Loverro, the Washington Times, and many, many books and so many other things that you've covered in your career. First, I want to ask you about this sports book. I know you're a big racing guy. You like the horses. To be able to come into this space, what were your first impressions of the Barstool Sports Book?
Well, it's very impressive. I mean, Charlestown is one of my favorite places, period. I've been coming here to play the horses for years. And I covered the opening of the sports book here when it first opened up. It was on a Saturday, and I was out here. I remember interviewing some guys who had driven as far as South Carolina just to be here for the opening of the sports book. Look, I've been to Las Vegas a lot of times, and I've been in a lot of sports books. This is a very impressive operation, and it really gives the feel of being in a sports book, the kind of place where you want to watch NFL football or NBA basketball with a bunch of your friends.
So much has changed in recent years when it comes to sports and betting. The industry is so different. It has really gotten a hold of betting and the sports and the games themselves. What have you seen, the evolution of it in the last, say, decade?
Well, dramatic since it's been legalized. I mean, just unbelievably dramatic. Companies like Barstool, and how influential they've become in sports media. I was telling you before, I teach a class at Georgetown in their sports management program called the Business of Sports Media. And last year, for about 4 weeks, we concentrated on sports gambling and sports betting, and teaching them about, kids who had never, they're college students, a lot of them have never gambled before, because some of them are going to wind up getting jobs working for places like Barstool and other places like that. They have become big players in the world of sports media. So that's a big dramatic change right there.
Tell me about early in the season, Washington Nationals, and of course I get the other side of it with the Baltimore Orioles, two teams that maybe not expected to do a whole lot this year, but you've had a chance to see the Nats up close.
Yeah, the Nationals are interesting, that they, in a way, they're not rebuilding. They're resetting, retooling, whatever we want to call it, because they have a crop of young players that are expected to be ready to play next year. A couple of young pitchers, some young infielders, but they're about a year away. So they managed to basically put together a team that they think is competitive, and so far it's been competitive, but they have a very thin margin for error. I mean, if something goes wrong, if their pitching goes south early in the game, they're not going to be able to make it up. They've been competitive. They won some games. They've gotten some good pitching. And they signed Nelson Cruz, familiar to Orioles fans, who still at the age of 38 is still a very impressive power hitter as a DH. So the Nationals are hoping to compete more next year. It would take a lot of things for them to go right, for them to compete this year. The Orioles, I don't watch them as much anymore. Everyone knows the story, though. They've been in this rebuild. They've had this very impressive minor league group of players that have been moving through the system, and people think they're probably, if not this year, next year, ready to explode with that. But it's asking a lot of fans to wait that long, and what they've been through for that. It's a tough ask.
I am one that will argue Nelson Cruz should have never left the Orioles, but that is a whole different subject. He is a Nat now. Staying in D.C., how about the Washington Capitals, who just sneak into the playoffs, but they are in, and they always say, right, once you're in, anything can happen. What do you think the chances for the Washington Capitals in the playoffs coming up?
Traditionally, except for the Stanley Cup year, which was a magical year for them, they're not particularly a good playoff team. I mean, except for that Stanley Cup year, under Ovechkin, they usually fold in the first or second round with Alex Ovechkin on the team. And, their goaltending has been okay this year. The year they won, the Stanley Cup, they had the great goaltending of Braden Holtby, which is what you really need when you're in the playoffs. They get a hot goaltender of the two guys that they've got. They can compete, but I think it's going to be a tough road for the Caps in the playoffs. There's a lot better teams that they're going to wind up facing, and they don't have a track record of overcoming odds.
I know you like the horses and the races. Triple Crown is coming up. We have been through this pandemic, and we're getting out of it, and I feel like maybe this Triple Crown is back to what we know it to be. Are you excited for this racing season coming up?
Oh, absolutely. Very much so. I think you're right. I think a lot of other people are excited for it. I always call the Triple Crown is America's walk on the wild side. You know, they participate, they watch baseball, they watch football, and then for, 5-6 weeks out of the year, you know, it's guys and dolls. You know, so, I mean, I think people love the idea. People, you know, obviously fill the sports books and the tracks with bets for them. But I've been to parties traditionally over the years. People have Kentucky Derby parties. People who have never bet before wind up betting amongst themselves. It's really an American tradition, I think, that people are looking to welcome back.
I know the sweet science is something you follow pretty well, too. What do you think about the popularity of boxing and how it has had to compete against MMA and some other things? Do you think that popularity is going to come back at some point?
No, I don't think so. No. It's really sad for me because I think I covered the last great era of boxing in the 90s, the era of Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe and Mike Tyson in his second go-around. You know, as boxing, as the heavyweight division goes, that's how boxing goes. The heavyweight division is what drives the train. There's a lot of great fighters at the lower divisions, but they're not marquee names. People want to see big guys in the ring pounding at each other, you know, and even the casual observer in boxing can tell they're not getting the quality of boxing that they used to get with the fighters today. Tyson Fury, you know, I've watched some of his fights, including two of his title fights at least, with Deontay Wilder, and he's an impressive fighter, and he's kind of a strange animal because he's 6'9", and he's really so agile. But other than that, the quality in the heavyweight division is down. I don't see it coming back like it was in the 70s, the golden era of boxing. I always explain to people, in the 70s, when you had all those great heavyweights of Ali and Foreman and Frazier and Ken Norton and Larry Holmes and those guys, when they were growing up, you could still make more money as a boxer than you could as an NBA power forward. Well, that changed in the 70s and particularly the 80s. So I think your boxers, your heavyweight fighters, are playing power forward in the NBA.
What was it like to cover Muhammad Ali?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I didn't get to cover much of him. I was working for a small weekly newspaper in the Poconos, and it was Ali's rematch with Leon Spinks.
Right.
It was the summer of '78, and Deer Lake, where he trained, was about an hour away. And I started going up, and I managed to befriend somebody in Ali's camp who, I mean, when Ali would work out, the place would be filled with people, and then he would go into a little dressing room where the New York Times would be, Sports Illustrated, the Daily News, almost every day, you know, and I was working for the Monroe County Sunday Herald. But some guy got me into the room once with him, with all those reporters. And I started doing more and more, writing stories, taking notes, until one time it was just him and I. There were no other writers there. It was just him and I. And he broke a story with me that when he retired, he was going to create this organization called World and donate all his money to World, you know, to help all kinds of various charitable causes. And that was my first big story that I ever broke, because nobody else had that. Now, it never actually happened, but at the time, it was news. So I had that summer with him. You know, when he came back in 1980 to fight Larry Holmes, I went back up, but it wasn't the same because that was a sad comeback, and it turned out to be a sad fight for Ali. He took a beating from Larry Holmes, fight he never should have taken.
You were around for the glory years. That's pretty cool. You got to tell me the story of how you ended up in the Oval Office one time talking baseball. Not exactly something every sports writer gets to do.
Well, I'm always looking for an angle, some way to get in somewhere. And the press secretary for George Bush, W. at the time, I read somewhere he was a member of my fraternity. I was a Sig Ep in Miami. And so he was a Sig Ep, Sigma Phi Epsilon someplace else. And, when a brother calls for help, you're supposed to help them. That's the idea. So I wrote a letter to him, pitching him on this, and seeing if he could get me in for an interview with his boss. And I didn't hear from him for months. So I figured, well, it was worth a shot. So I'm covering the Nationals on the road. This is their first season. They opened the season in Philadelphia. And I didn't tell anybody at the paper I had done this. It was just my own thing. And so I get a call from the sports editor saying, did you ask the White House for an interview with the president? And I said, geez, yeah, a long time ago. And he said, well, you're in. He said they've invited 3 reporters to come talk to the president when the Nats have their home opener, the Washington Post, USA Today, and you. So that's how I got in to the Oval Office. And it was great. I knew a lot of baseball writers who knew him when he was the owner in Texas, and they loved him. Very personable guy who loves baseball, loves talking baseball. And for that hour, we had a conversation about baseball, and it was great. And, he's the president, so he's got bigger things to take care of, but I could tell he didn't want to stop. He wanted to keep going.
He had a few good first pitches as well. He was
yes.
always good at being able to throw the baseball. There's a great event coming up, I know, that is near and dear to you, and you've been involved. DC Gray's Cigars and Curveballs coming up on May 9th. Give us a little bit of information about what that is.
Well, about 10 years ago, I got involved with an organization in D.C. called the DC Grays. It's a nonprofit organization that's committed to creating opportunities for inner city kids in baseball. Now, something that really, it really breaks my heart to see the demise of baseball in the African-American community, because when I grew up, those players were my heroes, guys like Willie Stargell and Hank Aaron and Cleon Jones for the Mets and guys like that. And, now it's down to a participation level of maybe 7% in the major leagues. And, I wanted to do something to try to change that, at least on a local level. So what we started to do, we field a team in the Cal Ripken Collegiate Baseball League of college players. We try to recruit minority players from different places as much as we can. And we were using those guys to run camps and clinics for kids in Wards 7 and 8 in the district, the poorer wards. Then we were designated to operate baseball's RBI program. Baseball runs a thing called Reviving Baseball in the Inner Cities. And they do it in almost every city in the country, but they didn't have one in Washington. We managed to get that, and as a result, we help about 300 young boys and girls. We give them equipment. We give them uniforms. We schedule games for them in the different leagues. We help take them to tournaments. And for the older ones, for college workouts, we help prepare them for that and set those up. And that's all done with volunteers and fundraising. And the Cigars and Curveballs is one of those fundraisers. I did it for 6 years, and then we took 2 years off because of COVID. For a $100 donation, people get 3 cigars. There's free appetizers, and we have an auction of various sports memorabilia and goods. And one of those items is a DC Grays jersey autographed by members of the 2019 Nationals World Series team.
Great cause. It's going to be a great night as well. Cigars and Curveballs, again, DCGraves.com. Thom Loverro, Brett Harris with you here at Barstool Sportsbook. Great to catch up with you, Thom.
Oh, great. Thanks for being on.
If you want to get involved, we love to hear from you. Just leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe right here on our YouTube channel.